Thank you guys for being here. Our panel is to talk about technology and how it's integrating with care coordination. It's a really big topic. It's actually a big topic for 8 a.m., especially after that great dinner last night. By show of hands, how many people here use EMARs? Okay, good. And then out of those, or whomever, how many people have an EHR platform? Okay, so that's really good. So before we get started, I'm going to go ahead and let these nice gentlemen and beautiful lady introduce themselves and who they're with. So Dan?
Dan Madsen, I'm from Leisure Care. Been in the industry about 30 years. Started out working out in the field as a general manager about 30 years ago. Kind of worked my way up till everybody left. Then I got to be the CEO. I kept waiting a little while, and I got to buy it. So that was a good way to do it. I couldn't get another job, so here I am.
Don't buy that one. I'm Lynne Katzmann. I'm with Juniper Communities, and we are in 4 states across the country and have buildings that range everywhere from IL to short-term rehab. And I've been in the industry 30 years, too. I'm kind of scary to say that, but nonetheless.
Geez, I'm feeling like a piker, 30 years. I'm Todd Novaczyk. We have a company in Minneapolis, based in Minneapolis, called New Perspective Senior Living. We have 21 communities in 4 states, and I founded the company 20 years ago. So I'm a rookie. So.
My name is Craig Patnode, and I'm with Simply Connect, and my background is not quite as long as I have, about 15 years in the senior housing space. And so a lot of experience on the electronic health record side, and then also managing care management program that we'll talk about a little bit today. So I'm from Minneapolis as well.
Great, thank you guys. So Craig, why don't you kind of start us off from your perspective, because you work with a lot of different operators and see a lot of things from a different lens. Why don't you talk to us about what you're seeing out there from operators and the integration of technology into the care coordination platform?
I think there's going to be a massive shift with what I call the thinking of what's going to happen coming out. And it's very difficult for folks to really understand it. I think, there's a lot of folks here that are talking about it, which is great, and making things happen as far as the coordination of care. From a technology viewpoint, there's going to be a massive shift. And I think there's going to be a big importance of the pharmacy, home care, and the importance of having maybe consultant pharmacies come in, doing medication reviews, really taking a look at moving healthcare data seamlessly, called actionable alerts. And I think you're going to see a massive shift in that area, which doesn't exist today. And that's really the only way to achieve the measurements that you're going to need to see as far as to report data back into the insurance companies. So that's really what I see as far as the landscape happening.
Mm-hmm. And when you say shift, what do you mean by shift?
Well, there's, you wake up every morning and you do business like you're doing today. And what's coming over the mountain is with the tsunami of the aging that's happening, we got to get so much more tighter as far as being connected. And partnerships and vendors are going to be critical to achieving the success that you're going to need to see. And it doesn't exist today because we've been doing business as usual for the whole time period. And what's going to happen now coming forward is it's going to force, technology will start to bring us together and start to move and communicate with the critical components that you have today. Because you are doing care coordination and care management is really going to be built off of care teams. And once we start to build care teams, you can start to communicate more and bring what I call data that's going to, and notifications to people that care for the person that you're caring for in the building. And what I mean by that is, like, for example, let's say there's a med error happening. That med error could be alerted to the physician immediately, and then the family would be included. You know, just getting the nurses to realize that, you know, you're going to get out of paper, you're going to stop using the fax machines, and you're going to get the nurse's life back and save that nurse 50% of her time in what she does every day. And that's not managing paper. And that's where the new models are going to start happening. And it's pretty impressive once you see it, but at the same time, you got to implement it. And it's all coming on the horizon.
Can I add something?
Yeah, Joe.
So, you know, when I look at healthcare in general, healthcare has been about siloed providers, right? Everybody's in their own little area doing their own thing. And now we're finding that we have to coordinate to be successful. We have to work together. And so being able to share information, whether it's data or whether it's things like alerts, is really the next step in the process. What's interesting from a senior housing perspective is that we're not typically considered one of those healthcare providers. And frankly, that's not necessarily a bad thing. What we do is provide the social supports. And anybody here of LTSS, long-term social supports? Okay, well, that's basically what we do. We do things like nutrition. We help with the activities of daily living. We help people get places. All of those things keep people well. And so the next part of the process, in my mind, is to integrate people and data together. And that includes us. That includes senior housing. And for people who haven't thought about that data as critical to well-being, I think that's the next step in the process. So I'm very excited about care coordination. I think we have to broaden the term beyond just traditional medical care coordination to include what we do.
I think that's, if I could.
Yeah, go ahead.
I think, you know, I look at the challenge of it because it's, you know, technology is happening so much faster than we're able to keep up operationally. So I immediately go to the operations side and go, all right, you know, even our new residents coming in and family members coming in are taking control of their own health and their own wellness, and they're getting data. They have it right here on their watch. You know, we're not too far away from when they come in and just push the button and then we have all their files and everything ready to go. But the integration, you know, may take a full care team. We may be adding a new department, you know, in our hospitality models that says, oh, we need this care team to be able to coordinate all these things and stay up with the technology, because it's to implement it nationwide. And, you know, we have 40 communities and bunches more coming on. And it's difficult to look at how you get people to, you know, take the action steps to do those things. And I know you've had that challenge and even challenge with us, you know, slow to get there. The new buildings are easy because you just start out that way. Well, not easy, but that's going to be kind of tricky. We're going to have to really shift our thinking into what departments we have within our operations.
Todd?
I don't have much more to add. One of the things we've coined in our company recently is we believe in God and all others bring data. So every department, so we're challenging every group in the company to be thinking that way and starting to look at things. And just one quick example, and maybe Craig can expound on it, but he's working with our Vice President of Clinical regarding narcotic management and how we can get it better integrated into the platform and get feedback, you know, like yesterday, right now. And so things like that are so important. And I don't know, Craig, if you want to just touch on that.
You know, there's a lot of stuff that, again, takes it from a paper process to electronic, but I'll give an example. Like, everybody here has probably rehab, and I'm a big component of rehab, because if we can intervene and give rehab 4 alerts that happen to the changes of the resident much sooner, your rehab's going to come in at the top of the bell curve. And what's happening in the industry, for example, is they're coming at the bottom of the bell curve. So they're doing their job, but they could be doing much better if they were being alerted way ahead of time with any change that they're looking for that would be part of the rehab process. And in this case, like what Todd's working on is a process for assessments that are really specific towards the program that you were talking about, the narcotic one, yeah, and that also, just getting that to be shared across the platform with physicians and nurses, that actually it's not in paper, but it can be pushed out. And it's also called, for example, static paper as another piece I like to use. Every action that the nurses do, they walk to the fax machine and they fax it. And you don't have to do that. Eventually, you're going to be able to just have it sitting there, and you're going to pull it in on a query base.
So we're already doing that. And it works really, really efficiently. The technology is very simplistic that we're doing it with, so I wouldn't say that the technology is there, but it's a process of bringing together a platform, a technology platform, a communication platform, and then getting everybody to buy in. And I go to your point, Dan. It's not just your teams. It's changing the way you think about technology, and more importantly, changing the way you think about working together. So, for example, instead of a whole department that does care coordination, we've reorganized our leadership team, which is our department head group in every community, and we've added a position. We call it a medical concierge. It's really a navigator, and that person's job is to bridge what we do with what happens in care outside of our community, or even in our community, but with providers that are not typical assisted living or skilled nursing providers. And that person has a series of functions. They function as an administrator, an auditor, a coach, and their job is to make sure all the data's in there and that everybody gets connected. We've done it in a way that hasn't cost us any money. It's worked so far. We've generated the results. But it's bringing together those two pieces that's critical, and it's the communication protocol. It's the workflows. So, and the workflows then get built into the technology, but you need the workflows to function before you can either build the technology around it or utilize technology that might have those workflows built into it. So it's something anyone can do. That has some basic way of communicating across all providers. For me, it's making sure everybody's on the same page. When you're out, and I'm not into sports, but that playbook that people talk about, everybody's got to be working from the same playbook. Same here. And it's not just the care providers. It's not just primary care rehab and the docs that come in and everybody else. It's your team. Because what your team does is alert everybody else to a change in condition. And when that happens early enough and the others see it and respond early enough, what happens? No hospitalizations, no ED use. All of that stuff starts going down and you save money. And that's where it gives us the opportunity. So just wanted to add that.
Go ahead.
Potentially the other missing team member in this is the resident and the family members.
Good point.
And they also have to accept a lot of things with this technology and all this care coordination. Yeah. And they have to see it as something that's very, very positive, something that's not a threat to their privacy. All those things need to be addressed as well. And I don't know that anybody's done that successfully, or they may have, but just stuff to think about down the road is how do you go to family members, or start doing people that haven't even moved in yet, and start asking them, how do we design our services and our products in the future to best accommodate, this wellness tsunami?
Right.
Because as much as any tsunami with technology, there's also this wellness tsunami. We're all drinking green juices and got all this stuff on us and doing all this stuff and getting all our steps in. And, this is a very proactive group that we're seeing. And we have to innovate with our services, with our operations, the design of our buildings. There's still, you can still spot most of our buildings from the freeway. When you're driving, that's a retirement community, that's one, that one.
Yeah.
There's the porte-cochere, there's the walk-in, there's the dining room. Something's going to have to change for all this. And I think it's a very, very exciting time. As challenging as it is, technology this fast, iPhone's been around 10 years. You know, that kind of did away with the concierge programs. You know, you just your own. And so the care coordination piece is going to be right in somebody's hand here in a minute. And we're going to figure out how to deal with that.
So let me ask you guys a question, and we'll kind of circle back around to this. Our industry isn't known, or at least in the senior housing space, we're not known to collect data very well, let alone share it. And so, making this shift into having to collect it so that we can help that resident's overall well-being by partnering with all the healthcare systems, how's it going to change the access to data from the consumer standpoint of resident families, that resident who owns the data, and are you going to share it, right? Because we're all afraid of litigation, and we're afraid of, oh my goodness, we missed a med, and we have to share that information. How do you guys think it's going to affect that space?
Well, I can go briefly. I think, there's a big paradigm shift about whose data is it? And when we first got in the space, I used the word one time saying it's my data. And the attorney said quickly, Craig, you can't say that. She's like, that's not your data. I'm like, you're right, it's not my data. It's the patient's data, it's the resident's data. And so from that perspective, you're going to have a process to opt in, and you're going to have to checkbox something that allows that data to move into the vehicle to essentially be traded, not traded, but shared. I think that's a big paradigm shift that we're going to start seeing is, who owns the data? It's the patient's data. And if you take a look at CMS, if you take a look at the $84 billion was spent through the meaningful use stages. The hospitals, the clinics, all got money. This industry here got no money. No money, no education. And so these vehicles here are educating people to come up. But after a while, the government finally said, you know what? This isn't really working the way we want it. We're going to do a paradigm shift and come out with a PHR. Everybody who leaves the hospital is going to have a personal health record on their phone. And that just came out about 2 months ago.
Who's got an Apple phone? Pull it out. On your Apple phone, right, go to the settings, right? Not settings, to the whatever, that face sheet, the equivalent of Apple's face sheet. Yeah. And on it, you're going to see a little white box with a red heart. Click on it. And up's going to come a bunch of things. And at the bottom, you're going to see something that says health record. Right? Click on it. See what happens. See what it says. Okay, that's the future. That is the future. And that ties into your watch, and my watch, and whatever other peripherals. That's the future. And I think you're 100% right. It's a personal health record. It's not an EHR that's owned or, and I'm sorry, all of you that have technology companies that do provide EHRs, there'll be a place for that, but it's going to be very different, right? And Apple and Google and Microsoft and Amazon are all doing this. By my prediction, and hold me to it, guys, is within 2 years, you're going to see a dramatic shift in how information is shared. And the fact that it's a PHR is really, a personal health record is going to be the disruption in the electronic data world. I'll go a couple of steps further. That data is, people are collecting massive amounts of data. The gentleman who spoke yesterday was spot on. He showed you a bunch of screens about where the data's going and the amount of data which is being collected. Ambient technology, so there are now lights that can follow you around and carpets that know when you're going to fall, and all of that data that you don't have to wear something for is called ambient data or ambient technology that collects data. That's all over. Think about that. When all of that data is collected and becomes the base for understanding your patterns, that's going to shift everything. So PHRs are going to be the key. I'll give you another example of why I think that's going to happen. And the government. Anybody hear of something called Blue Button? Thank you, Jacqueline. Blue Button was developed by the VA. And it was a way to provide veterans access to their health information. And I can't remember, it was done probably 10, 15 years ago. And CMS got hold of it and they said, gee, this is pretty interesting stuff. And so CMS got on, and up until 2 years ago, you could tell CMS that you wanted access to your health records. Now, the data wasn't real time. It was based on claims information, but you could get your data free as an individual. You had to sign up as an individual. Blue Button went away for a while. It's back. At HIMSS this year, the big industry conference for tech, Blue Button was reintroduced as an open source with an API platform. So that means that the government wants us to have personal health records and wants developers to develop apps that will not only share information, but provide information. And that's, in my mind, what Apple's doing. What do you think? You're the tech guy.
No, you're absolutely right. I mean, it's, there's going to be, instead of running claims-based data, which is what's happening, which is usually downstream, it doesn't happen right away. Everyone they're going to measure, everyone's going to have a heartbeat. And we're all going to know pretty much what the heartbeat is on every person who's insured. That's where it's headed. And to get that, you have a virtual scale. You literally could walk on a scale today, grab the weight, and if you're like a COPD, if you lose essentially like 3% of your weight in a 2-day span, that's a problem. And so those are types of things that we're going to start seeing is real-time information, where you're going to see this in senior housing as well. You're going to be able to measure and be able to know what's happening to the resident. It's a massive amount of data, but you're only got to take out the snippets of the stuff that matter to make it actionable, to intervene sooner. And essentially, that's going to create a quality of life for these residents that is much greater.
Yeah, and I think Apple announced this week, right, that they
It
did
was
a
this
healthcare
week.
record last week,
Yeah,
on the 5th,
that's it.
an API to allow developers and healthcare researchers to access and create new apps and stuff to make it interoperable, to get the data.
What are we going to do with all this data? That's the other thing. So it's, back to your point, there's God and then there's data guys, and then we get all this data, that all the data is swirling around, and at the end of the day, we're still in a person-to-person business.
Yes.
And although we're data-driven, or we have the data, we can't become those data clinicians.
That's why we need-
have to be out there and realize that we're still in the hospitality business. We're still people serving people, and employees and residents and their families, and that being able to just know in advance and make sure you put those protocols in and the training in and everything else. With all this stuff that's coming in, that we don't sit in our offices and start reviewing all this data versus being out and making good things happen for people. And that's, I love the challenge.
Yeah, so to that point, right, we all know that this is coming, and it's coming at warp speed. Yeah. Much quicker now, because technology just evolves every second. There's something brand new. What have you guys been doing in your organization? I mean, all of you guys are very seasoned in this space, and so you've been able to see the evolution of our residents. That was my nice way. Seasoned.
Seasoned. I like
Seasoned.
that,
You like
Lori.
that? Right,
Seasoned.
that plan was? Yeah, seasoned. That was seasoned very nicely, by the way. So you've been able to see the senior housing space kind of evolve, and our residents are coming in with higher acuity, and now we've got this overlay of technology, and what do we do with all this data? What are you guys doing today? I know, Lynne, you talked a little bit about your concierge, but what are some things that you're doing today to adapt and kind of get you a head start on what you think is coming in the future with all this data collection?
No, that's me. Okay. We've been doing it for a while. What's interesting, and the one thing that I want to point out, particularly to all of us in the industry, is that we inherently do care coordination. It's what we've always done. We provide health monitoring. We keep people's lives together. We make sure they have food 3 times a day or more. We make sure they get their meds. All of that is very central to care coordination. So when we talk about it as something new, I think it's worth making the point that all of us do that as a matter of course. It's part of what our industry, if not being set up to do, has evolved into. And I think it's a really good thing. So we are very experienced at care coordination. What we haven't done as well is figured out how, and many of us do it de facto, but not intentionally, is coordinate with the curative side. of the picture. And for most of the people that we serve, we've got this, the high need, high cost population. Who are the people that come into our buildings? They don't come because they want a good lifestyle, although we hopefully will get there. They come because they want to maintain a good lifestyle at the same time that they need some extra help. So it's a combination of things. So we've got to do both. Those needs have always been there, and we serve those needs. But what we need now to do is to bring in the curative side, primarily in the form of primary care, in my mind. Because that, in the curative system, in the old system, they're the navigator. They're the ones that were the gatekeeper. And so by bringing them in, we essentially bridge the two worlds. And so what we've done at Juniper is we've added to the traditional rehab and pharmacy and home care and hospice, we've added primary care. And it's on site, and that's been a really wonderful addition. I don't think we fully understood what we were doing when we added it, but it has become critical to our effort to coordinate care. So we integrate that with an electronic operating system, with data and a communication platform, and this person. So I couldn't agree with you more, Dan. You can't, the tech and the data is helpful. It gives you information, good information on which to make decisions. But when it comes to implementing those decisions, particularly with our population, you need a person. So we look at it as high tech, high touch, and the program we call Connect for Life. So I hope that's clear.
Yeah, the challenge for us, I mean, right now, with the acuity, it is just amazing. When I started in 1998, it was basically a hospitality model, which many of you remember. It was very easy, and we called a lot of, the majority of the residents were congregate. And of course now the acuity is just going through the roof. They're coming in later and later. And so when we are trying to do things like we bring rounding docs into the buildings, and then they get followed up with the physician assistant who comes back the next week and the next week to try and implement, is how do we communicate and how are we getting that into a system where we're really talking with not only that rounding doc, the physician assistant, the resident, the family, and then our nurses, and how do we tie that together? You know, another point is we have physical therapists in all of our communities, occupational therapists, every week, all day, and so they're putting people on programs. Again, how are we going to tie this into the model where we can help them understand where they are, where do they want to go, and then more importantly, how are we going to get them there? What are the bridges that we need to build to get them from where they are to where they want to go, vis-a-vis whether it's the rounding doc or the podiatrist coming in or the physical therapist coming in. Another big challenge for us, and maybe many of you are dealing with this, I know some here in the room have full-time nursing 24/7, which I think is maybe where we're headed at some point, but right now we don't. So what we've done is we've brought in triage nurses. We have 5 that are literally work all evenings and all weekends. And again, the coordination of communication of what's happening at that moment of truth at 2 a.m. with the triage nurse and the caregiver. And again, we need, and then you might want to get back into the telemedicine thing. Okay, how do we bring real life telemedicine into that relationship between the triage nurse talking to somebody in a community at 2 a.m. and how do they help coordinate the care and the decision? Is that a call? Do they have to go out, or is this something we can take care of internally? Obviously, we prefer to keep them in the community and take care of it. But again, that's the challenge. And just as an aside, it's interesting. I really believe that we've got some data on this, but when we've gone to the triage scenario a couple years ago, we've actually seen it become more of a retention program, I think, for nurses, because they're not being on call every evening and every weekend. Yeah. And so it's just, like I said, just purely an aside, not relevant to what we're talking about here, but it's been an interesting program because it really has given our nurses kind of that breathing room a little bit where they can kind of go, okay, I'm not going to get called at 2 a.m. The triage nurse is getting called. So we really believe that has been acting as somewhat of a retention program for us, for nurses. So
I think that's a great point because, to dovetail from that is take that nurse who's in the industry today. There's a term that's called MTM, medication therapy management. It's actually a CPT code that the payers are willing to pay for, but nobody does it in senior housing. 90% of them go undone, unchecked, and what that is a consultant pharmacist who's trained to look at the medication review and make sure that they're on the right med. And just in Illinois last year, 400 people died because they were over-medicated. And I think that's really what I'm seeing in this industry is there's the nurse themselves, and your role, Todd, is managing these meds. And they could shift that responsibility to the consultant pharmacist, which isn't happening. And you're going to start seeing that happen nationwide now. All the writing is starting to come out to start bringing focus on medication reviews. The insurance company will pay for it, so it's not out coming out of your pocket. And that's another aspect that will help alleviate the nurse in your buildings because they're also doing that work, and they're really not, that's not part of their license. And so from that, mental health is a big issue, and behavioral health, and you're going to start seeing also get that corrected, and I think that's a big portion that we see in the next, literally in the last 12 months, it was very apparent of how much non-oversight is happening to folks in the buildings that are taking meds. And the system set up is just busted. It's not working the way it should. And you're going to start seeing that happen, I think, in the next 12 months as it comes out.
Yeah, go ahead.
It might be a counterpoint to a couple of these, just on who's coming into buildings or who's moving in. We've been seeing a bit of the opposite. We've been seeing people, the age has never changed. I haven't seen the average age change in 30 years. 1 or 2 years anyway, but we're seeing people come in well and healthy and active and coming in sooner in a lot of our products, and different product types in different regions, I understand. But they're wanting to take control. We're seeing different desires from coming in and wanting to be taken care of, or having a son and daughter want them to be taken care of or whatever, to engaging in looking at a lock and leave lifestyle and what other things can we do. And which, as you guys are talking about this, I'm going, oh man, if they come in with all this and they're saying, all right, we have our own wellness program, we have our own data, we have our own coaches, we have all these things we want. How are you going to provide it, track it, and all of those things if they're doing it themselves, right? I mean, more on an independent side, that could be a challenge as well. Just seeing where that goes.
Yeah.
I think the only, you're going to have to get people to give permission into their data bank. And that's ultimately what I see happening is everyone will have their own PHR. You control it. And if you want to be part of a particular program, you have to allow a group of providers or a coordinator to have access to that data on a regular basis. So it'll be controlled by the individual, I think.
So what challenges, you guys obviously, are starting to take the steps to kind of collect your data and integrate everything. What challenges are you finding with trying to implement these systems into your buildings?
Mindset. It is so hard. We talked yesterday, there were some great panels on, how we're thinking and how we're changing. And I think I walked away yesterday feeling really happy to hear people saying we're changing, because that's honestly for me one of the first times I've heard such widespread belief that as an industry we have to move to the next generation. But even with that, it's really hard to get everyone who, particularly your longtime associates, to kind of jump on board. We're comfortable, just like anyone is, doing things the way we've always done them. It's easier. Then you have change, and change involves technology. And I think it's hard to get people to join on board. I think the one thing that's really been cool for us, and we've not done a great job of it, but we're going to try to do better, is to share with people more, not just the results of the data, how we're having impact, but really bring them into the process and provide recognition that they too are part of something which is forward thinking. And that's been, particularly for the younger and the newer employees, that's been a really valuable thing. So I'd love to hear what you guys are doing, because we can all learn from it.
Our challenge is the same. It's, talked to Dave yesterday. We were just out here talking, and we just go, wow, it's interesting that you have, everything we ever wanted was tenure, right? We want tenure. You know, we're very proud of it. You know, it's been a general manager for 20 years and kicked it the whole time. And then you go, but it's the same operation it's been for 20 years. Have we continued to innovate? And the same department heads. And you know, if you grow and you stay with it, or you lead the innovation, that's great. But if it's the same old way of doing things, it makes it very difficult to go in and say, no, let's not fax anymore, right? They just like that fax machine.
No
There's
more
a
paper.
control.
Done.
Yeah, exactly. So I agree. That you have that mindset of your more seasoned you know, executives and people around. And then to me, the newer ones coming in are teaching us. They're walking in and teaching us, which is, so how to get those together is going to be interesting.
Todd, do you have anything?
Yeah, I see it also from the standpoint that you're right. It's a mind shift. I mean, it's a truly, you got to manage it. I'm also a firm believer that it's a top-down approach. If the top person in the company or the top two people don't buy into these models, it's not going to change. Right. And you really got to have that vertical through the whole organization, as everybody knows. It's easier said than done, but if that top person in the company does not buy into the whole philosophy of the change, it's going to stop in the middle because people don't like change. And so that's where the stuff stops. But from an inside perspective looking up, if you can get that vertical nature going where everyone has to be in alignment and you're in the mind shift, then you're going to start seeing a lot of things happen quickly. And I think that's what I think some really good operators are doing in making these changes.
So with what y'all are doing right now, I'm from the South, so y'all's a word in our vocabulary. What are the benefits that you've been able to see by building these partnerships or sharing your data, or whether it's through other healthcare providers or your census or employee recruitment? Like, what have been some benefits?
I don't have any results yet, but just as an example, there's 5 operators in the metro St. Paul, Minneapolis area that we've decided to just meet the CEOs. And usually then it's maybe we'll bring in to different meeting. We have one meeting a quarter, and we're just talking about this, about what could we share between these 5 different companies in the Twin Cities. And we'll bring in, maybe the clinical person, one time, maybe it's the ops person, and they join the conversation. So we've had, now we've been doing this for about a year, and I don't have any results, but we're really, I think, progressing down a track where we're starting to communicate and talking about what our needs are and what each group is trying to do internally and sharing. And so I think what it's going to do is going to end up at some point here where we're probably going to agree to collect and share certain data, certain ideas, certain results, outcomes. What are the outcomes to certain things we're doing, whether it's physical therapy or med management, whatever it is. So that, again, I don't have anything to report, but we're kind of moving down that road, and we've physically started to meet and talk about it, and it's really, for us anyway, it's been very helpful, very interesting.
So we have data. We've been doing this thing called Connect for Life, which has evolved actually since 2012. And it's a care coordination model, an integration model. And we have been collecting data. And we hired Ann Tomlinson, who many of you may know. She's an established researcher and policy person in the industry. And she and her team came in and looked at our data and compared it to the data of a similarly profiled Medicare population in the community. So we're talking about people that aren't necessarily in buildings like ours, but who live in the community. There were 6 million of them compared to I think we had a sample of 437, which is not huge, but given the size of our company, that was a pretty decent sample. What she found is that our integrated care program dramatically reduced utilization of the highest cost services, so emergency department readmission and hospitalization. And most of you guys have heard me talk about this. It's published data. I invite everyone to use it as an example of what our industry can do. And the savings, after we got the utilization results, we knew we had done something, but we really didn't think it was that good. And when the results came out, it was like mind-blowing. The numbers are 80, we reduced readmissions 80% as compared to that same group. Our hospitalizations by 50%. Huge numbers. When you monetize that, it was $10 to $15 billion a year for that 6 million people. That's huge. So it's on our website, I'll give you that. But that data shows that we, senior housing, can really have an impact on the healthcare system. We are a solution for society, and it's good for our industry. So feel free to use those data.
Yeah, thanks for sharing that.
Sure.
Lynne. So Craig, to kind of make, in your opinion, to make all this happen, obviously there has to be a tech stack in place. What are you seeing out there? What do you suggest? How do people get started? What does it look like?
Well, I think you could start, you got to take 1 or 2 or 3 steps, obviously, and I think you could focus on a couple different areas. One would be, really focus, I think, with home care is one step, and pharmacy, and then consultant pharmacy, and making sure that you got a physician play. I think everyone here is starting to work with the physicians that are coming into the buildings, and making sure that those folks are connected is the key, and getting the data to start moving. And I think that's really what, you got to have the tools to do it. That's the other thing, is that you can do, like you're mentioning, you're doing it already, which is you're already making it happen.
It's makeshift, but it works.
Yeah, right, it works, exactly, because it's the mindset that you're driving to make it work. It's going to get a lot more efficient.
Yeah.
What's that?
The tools will come.
The tools are coming, yeah, absolutely. And, I think, your talk yesterday was really right on. I mean, I think you could almost expound a little bit more on that as far as, that portion of the insurance play that you're working on, the shift, yeah. Because I think that, when I've seen that, that's exactly what needs to happen for you to take control of your building and your residents. Or if you don't start making these moves, then you might want to touch a little bit on that.
Sure.
I think there's a little bit of a shift. I think I'd like to get that in on this talk, because I think that was really, I was really impressed by that.
So I'm seasoned. I hope I'm well seasoned.
Very well seasoned.
I've been around for a while. I'm at that point in my career where I really feel that our industry is in a state of flux, and that we can make a real difference. And some of the work that so many of us are doing makes differences in people's lives every day. We don't always get the credit for that in the way that we should, and I think that's a real problem. Some of the work that we've done, that I just talked about, the results, really have an impact not only on our industry but on society. This is the biggest problem coming down the road, or one of the biggest problems coming down the road, is this growing, the silver tsunami. But who are the silver tsunami? They're people with diabetes, obesity. They've got all kinds of issues. And those issues cost society money as people age, right? Because your body breaks down and things happen, and then you have to have hip replacements like me, and it's crazy, costs a fortune. So we've got to do something about that. What we've done is shown that we have a solution. that when you link service-enriched housing with chronic care management, and not just link, but integrate, truly integrate the two, you can really make a difference in people's lives. You can save money for society. So here's the deal. We started off with this thing. We found we could save $10 to $15 billion. How do we get some of that? You know where that $10 to $15 billion goes back to? Medicare. And if not Medicare, Humana. Right? Humana, United, Aetna, take your pick, Centene. So we said, well, how do we get a piece of that? And we did a lot of thinking about it. And what we realized is that we needed, as an industry, to actually become Medicare Advantage providers and control the healthcare dollar. So I've been talking with a lot of people about getting together and going back to the point about season. This isn't about Juniper. This is about our industry. This is about coming together and making a difference. And I will say that when you become a Medicare Advantage plan, there's obviously risk and there's safety in numbers. So the more people that are part of something together, the bigger statement we will make. Won't be easy, it's not gonna be perfect, there are gonna be lots of bumps along the way. We are gonna put in some money and maybe even lose some money, although I don't think it will be much given our ability to create results. We can control the dollar and hopefully begin to control the conversation. So it's called the Perennial Consortium. Anybody that's interested, welcome to talk to me, but it's about us coming together to take control of our destiny in terms of dollars as well as care coordination.
And Lynne, would you predict, if not know, that having the data for something like that would only benefit us and help?
Oh yeah. I mean, you can't do true care coordination in my mind without some way of collecting data. And there are many ways to do it. Different people in this room have been collecting data in many different ways. We collected data long before we had an EHR. It's easier to analyze and to share with an EHR or some kind of electronic platform, but people have been doing it for a long time. Bringing together people and having that data and showing those kind of outcomes on a much bigger basis than we've been able to can only positively impact our industry, in my mind.
Great. So we only have about a few minutes left. So first off, does anyone have any questions? Yes, Ted.
So this entire conference has been about the threat of external actors taking away our industry. And I think this trend towards more and more data is going to help people stay at home. So I'm curious, Lynne, the Perennial Consortium, how can something like that reduce, sort of create more of a branding for the industry to reduce the tendency of people to think they can take care of themselves at home?
So longer term, starting something like this in senior housing makes sense. We are a captive market that we can talk to people about and do things with. It's an actually very interesting business if you think about it from a marketing perspective. But down the road, there are three verticals for something like this. One is home-based care, which then provides a way for us to work together with people in the community before they may want or need our services. And the other, quite frankly, is affordable housing, is layering this kind of a program on top of affordable housing. So I think there are ways of putting it out into the community and bridging those gaps. Honestly, the rest of this conversation here at the conference has been about experience and about how, what it means to provide what we do in the future. And I think healthcare is a foundation. It won't be the controlling factor. It has to be there. We all have it. The question is, how is it delivered, and how does it support a good lifestyle?
Yeah, I like the lifestyle piece. There's nearly 80 million people. Our penetration rate in this industry is extremely low.
Yep.
It's this little, and as we see this tsunami coming, and it's been the easiest thing to do research because you just go watch how they behaved 10 years before. There's the exciting part is how many different products and services that are going to be out there. And when we stop looking at ourselves as a senior housing company or industry, when we start looking at ourselves as providers of lifestyle and integrating all of these things, and it can be at home, it can be in small villages, we don't even know yet. But if, I was speaking at NIC a while ago, and people asked, what's the challenge to innovation in our industry? And one of the things I said, probably the rebel I am, I said, it's the financiers. You know, you won't finance a new idea. You like it in a box, there's our box, do that. This is what you guys do. I think the fun part of looking at the opportunities versus the challenges is that we can really get creative on how we integrate into people's lives, you know, in their 50s, 60s, 70s, 80s. They're going to be healthier, or they're going to be a bigger number of people that are healthier and want to take control and stay at home or find some way to get together as groups, some affinity groups. We're going to find so many weird affinities out there. And how we capture those and become integrated is, I think it's fun. It's a great time to be in this industry because it's really pretty new at this point, even though we're on our final days.
I like the way we look in our final days.
You guys look very nice and dapper. Any other questions? So I guess to close it out, do you guys have any parting words or thoughts or? Okay.
You know, I got one. What comes to my mind is if I was an operator, I'd be focusing on the home, and I would be empowering the technology. There's so much new technology that's going to help people stay home, but taking the lifestyle approach you're doing, Dan, and let them be part of the model, but still at home, and that will become your feeder. You're going to get an older, obviously an aging person at that point, but still at the same time, you could still create a lifestyle for that person because of the loneliness factor and still have them part of that community.
Yeah.
I think that is what I see would be a really dynamic model that you could really embrace and maybe go out 10 miles from your building. But if you embrace that, but they be part of your model, of your social model and your lifestyle model, I think could be really powerful. That's what I see.
Good? Yeah. All right, Michael.
Well, thank you so much, guys, for an excellent conversation here, and I'd like to thank Lori for doing a great job moderating. Thank you guys so much.